Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, this is Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things ready through a common sense lens. And ladies and gentlemen, the box offices are in, right? We have Fantastic Four's first 2 weekends in. We kind of have the projections for this weekend as far as how it's going to do. It's going to end up losing its #1 spot, but that's not really all that unexpected in a third weekend out there, right? It's pretty kind of crazy if a movie actually holds its third weekend as the #1 spot. It's absolutely insane if something like that happens. But what's not absolutely insane and unusual is the 50 to 60% drop that Fantastic Four ended up having from weekend to weekend. And it could potentially get even worse this weekend out there. Most films end up dropping by 50%, and a lot of its predecessors in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even just this year, have done the exact same thing. So the estimates are probably pretty accurate. Obviously, the early estimates were completely and totally way off, and especially that second weekend drop, they were incredibly underestimating that one as well. And needless to say, all of these things end up adding to one simple thing. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Fantastic Four will more than likely, and at this point, it's basically beyond a shadow of a doubt, will end up being Marvel's third consecutive flop of the year, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, at this point, even with its reported budget, there is no way this movie will end up even coming close to the $625 million globally it needs to end up actually making a profit. And ladies and gentlemen, it is so much worse than that, especially for Disney as a whole, but even more specifically when it comes to Marvel. Because as you can see here from the headline from thatparkplace.com, Fantastic Four projected to become Marvel's third flop of 2025, making 6 of 7 MCU films box office losers. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt about it whatsoever in my mind, and honestly, any honest broker out there with a little bit of common sense, that this movie will end up flopping and costing Disney Marvel a whole bunch of money at the box office. And boys and girls, the real only question is, how much money is this movie going to lose? Is it $100 million? Is it $50 million? Is it hundreds of millions of dollars? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've collected a whole bunch of information this morning, because this is what happens when I wake up too early and can't go back to sleep, because this is in a long trend, a long history of Disney spending way too much money on its budget and all of these movies flopping and losing money. And the best part about it is the reported budgets alone, we are going to once again prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that these movies always run over budget. And despite the crying, the gnashing, and the whining of all of the little pixie dusters out there in my comment section, yes, Fantastic Four will be a flop. Not only are we going to do the math on it for you, but we're also going to remind you while the reported budget is complete and total BS. Because clearly some people out there need a re-education on that once again. So we're going to check out this article from thatparkplace.com, getting all of the juicy details of what's been going on with the Marvel's Fantastic Four flop, and of course Disney's history overall of all of these massive flops and failures. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing. We just crossed 2,100. We're still on our way towards 22. I think we're sitting at like 21, 24, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, leave us a comment in the section down below. What do you think about all this? Do you agree or disagree that Marvel's Fantastic Four first steps will beyond a shadow of a doubt will end up being a flop? If you think this movie could actually end up making a profit, give me your justification for that down below. If you think this is a long history of Marvel trends and something that clearly Kevin Feige, Bob Iger, and everybody else over there have been involved with and completely and totally allowed to happen, let us know. Think about that in the comment section down below as well. And also let us know, do you agree that Kevin Feige, Marvel, and all of the rest of the Disney are in a very bad spot financially, and they simply are not going to turn things around, because this is going to be a continued decline because they just can't help themselves? Let us know all that in the comment section down below. If you support the channel, please check out the links in the description as well. All right, from our dear sweet WDW Pro, the absolute legend over there at That Park Place, make sure you go subscribe to his YouTube channel. The guy gives great insider information on Disney all of the time, and definitely deserves all of the subscribers and even more than he has. As Fantastic Four first steps head for flop territory with a 66% or more, drop at the box office in its second weekend, more closely to like 67, but you know what? 66, either way, doesn't matter. It's bad. Marvel's track record of producing more financial failures than successes is becoming common knowledge. Whatever the cause, woke, Kevin Feige's grand plan for the fourth and fifth phases of Marvel has been as awful as the first three phases were record-breaking in the other direction. And I mean, that's undoubtedly true. I mean, it was one of those things that you could almost bank for a period of time there that a Marvel movie was beyond a shadow of a doubt going to make a profit, if not end up at least sniffing $1 billion, if not crossing that line. Those days are long gone, boys and girls. Outside of Deadpool and Wolverine, Marvel has not had a single movie cross $1 billion since Avengers Endgame, ladies and gentlemen. And guess what? There's also a very real argument to be made that we're going to touch on here in a little bit as to why not a single Marvel movie has made a profit since Endgame, boys and girls. Asterisk on Deadpool and Wolverine. Since 2020, Disney's once infallible Marvel Studios has experienced a sharp downturn at the box office, with many of its recent theatrical releases failing to turn a profit by traditional Hollywood accounting standards. Yes, 2.5 times toward actual reported budget, even though more accurately, you probably need to be doing it by 3 or 3.5 times, according to Robert Meyer Burnett, a Hollywood guy who actually still works there, for how much money they end up spending on the marketing. But let's just go with the 2.5 times, right? Based on reported budgets. And for my argument's sake, talking about the fact that nothing has been profitable since Endgame for Disney Marvel out there, you could argue that Fox Marvel is really what the Deadpool and Wolverine movie is, literally, because these budgets are always drastically underreported. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Using a commonly accepted benchmark of a film must earn at least twice its production budget plus the P&A expenses to account for global marketing and distribution costs, which is where you get the industry standard of 2.5 times the production budget, a number of Marvel titles distributed by Disney have either flopped financially or barely broken even, an alarming trend for what was once the most bankable franchise in entertainment history. And yes, that barely broke even is pro being kind and actually going, we'll go by strictly your Hollywood standards and your Hollywood reported budgets and not the actual budgets that you do so desperately try to hide every chance you get out there. Same Disu says, this is the Fantastic Four First Steps grossed $11.7 million domestically in its second Friday debut on the big screen, making a devastating 80% drop from its debut. We already went over this, especially if you watched my video. Sam Dew says this is a factor of multiple things. Marvel had so many flops for so long that people no longer care about it. Marvel burnout. The next thing is Pedro Pascal fatigue. No, outside of Hollywood, the majority of the audience has no desire. He is not the hot thing for the vast majority of the audience out there. He's only the hot thing for Hollywood. And the third is the cast is openly discussing their political views, which is a turnoff at best and completely alienates and a complete alienation of a good portion of your audience, at least half your audience, based on some political things that happened, back in November. But it's one of those things, he's absolutely right. The Marvel burnout is real. Nobody wants to see Pedro Pascal in absolutely everything anymore. It's just not something that happens in any way, shape, or form. Perhaps the most prominent example is The Marvels 2023, which earned just $260 million globally, against a production budget estimated at $307 million, right? But, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, if we pop up over to the numbers over here, the numbers, the Marvels, right? Because what was the reported budget for the numbers on the Marvels? Look, they don't even want to put it in here. It's that bad, boys and girls. Well, reported budget, we do know that the movie went drastically over its budget, but its reported budget was $270 million. And guess what? It turns out that's not what the actual budget was. Estimated later on down at $307 million. But we know that those budgets are much heavier. Unlike break-even calculations, the film would have needed to generate at least $714 million worldwide to be considered financially successful. That's before we consider the marketing spend, which easily sends those numbers even higher. Instead, it ranks as the lowest grossing MCU film to date, resulting in an estimated loss of over $250 million. Another high-profile disappointment, Ant-Man and the Wasp, which cost approximately $330 million to produce and brought in $476 million globally. Now we know more of the actual numbers. Why do we know more of these actual numbers? Well, boys and girls, Disney likes to go out there and film things in the United Kingdom. Why? So that way they get all the big fat tax benefits, which is why we found out movies like Star Wars Rise of Skywalker out there, as you can see over here from this Forbes article, actually ended up costing $582.3 million, boys and girls. What was the reported budget for Rise of Skywalker, you ask? Ladies and gentlemen, $275 million. Over double what the reported budget for this movie was. I did a little math earlier, and we'll do it a little live for you here again as well. $582 million, right? That's what the Forbes article said that movie actually cost. That means that movie would have needed to make $1.4 billion globally in order to actually make a profit. Well, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the funny part about all of that is that's not even what it came close to making. Because if we go Star Wars Rise of Skywalker over here and just go to the numbers, what are you thinking? What are you thinking, boys and girls? Before you even see it, does anybody remember? Does anybody remember? What did that movie actually make worldwide at the box office? Boys and girls, any guesses? $1 billion and 69,000. $1 billion, which means Rise of Skywalker lost money. Why? Why? But the reported budget was $270 million. Well, that's what Disney told you. That's what Disney told you was the budget. And then after you take UK tax filings, we find out the actual budget was $582 million. Explain to me again how Black Panther Wakanda Forever was a profitable movie at $859 million globally. Because this is a trend for Disney. This is what they do. That's why they're talking about the actuals over here at that Park Place. Because Captain America, Brave New World, we'll never know the real budget of it. But Disney Marvel already admitted in their last quarterly earnings report that the movie was a loss, right? And the movie was a loss. And once again, this is a reported budget out there of $180 million. But after 22 days of reshoots, basically an entire summer spent there doing it, I'd imagine that movie came in a little higher than $180 million. Because at $180 million, would Captain America, Brave New World, have actually lost money like Disney says it does? Well, let's find out. Let's do a little bit of math here and do Captain America, Brave New World, right? Right here. Captain America, Brave New World. The financials on all of that one. Direct access to the page. What are you doing over here? The numbers. What are you doing? Trying to hide things? I have no idea out there, but we'll find out here in just a second. But actuals, like he talked about over here, were over $300 million, boys and girls. And the real question is, how bad is it going to actually end up getting? Because $300 million to produce what was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. At this point, you might bring up Eternals, Shang-Chi, or Black Widow. Of those, only Shang-Chi may have broken even financially. may, which, as we already talked about, with reported budgets out there, boys and girls, we know that's not actually the case. Because even at a reported budget, let's pull up the calculator again, 180 million times 2.5 is $450 million. And it couldn't even crack that. But we know the budget for that movie is way over even those numbers, boys and girls. Yet they come from the quote-unquote pandemic era, which also was Spider-Man 3, Brand New Day, and that, or No Way Home, and that movie crossed $1 billion globally. So tell me about the pandemic being an excuse again, boys and girls. Superhero flicks were struggling to convince consumers to return to theaters, unless it was Spider-Man. For this reason, although I'll mention them, I set them into separate categories. List detractors claim we're being unfair. You know, those pixie dusters out there in the thing. The trend continued in 2025. Thunderbolts, which Disney in their earnings call at the time of recording today, admitted that the Thunderbolts lost money. Despite critical praise and modest marketing, the film earned $371 million. Thunderbolts likely need to earn north of $500 million or more to break even. While not all Marvel films in the area have struggled, few and further between. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever was a solid performer, grossing over $850 million worldwide, thanks in part to a large, strong emotional resonance and built-in fan base honoring the late Chadwick Boseman. Do we need to go back to Star Wars and talk about actual budgets? Or go back to Captain America, Brave New World, and what reported budgets versus actual budgets actually are? Black Panther, Wakanda Forever lost money. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, unless James Gunn was actually able to keep it to budget, also lost money. Cry more, you pixie dusters. Still, the broader picture reveals an unsettling shift. 5 of the last 6 major MCU films failed to achieve financial success by traditional standards. These shortcomings amid ballooning production costs, saturation of superhero content, and a growing sense of franchise fatigue among audiences. While Disney once enjoyed near guaranteed box office dominance with each Marvel release, the margin for error has narrowed. Mid-tier and low-profile entries in the MCU now struggle to justify their increasingly hefty price tags. Fantastic Four has flopped. Star Wars reported budget dwarfed by actual costs. Is the industry hiding Disney's real expenses in a massive way? Yes, absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Screen Rant, Andor's eye-watering $645 million budget. The Acolyte, budget to be revealed north of $200 million. According to the Stupendous Wave, $230 million is what they spent on The Acolyte. Reportedly, $180 million. So explain to me again, pixie dusters, how we're supposed to believe the reported budgets for any of these movies out there, boys and girls. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the closest one to sniff $1 billion since Endgame. 952. Reported production budget, $200 million. Do you believe that? Even if you don't believe all the rest of the examples I've given you, even if you believe that maybe it was right on Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, then why did Elizabeth Olsen flat out say they were constantly reworking the script almost nonstop and it pushed production to go even longer? She flat out said she stopped reading the dailies because by the time she got to set, the script would have completely and totally changed. What do you think that does for a production budget? What do you think that did for the Marvels and all of its reshoots? What do you think that did to the Rise of Skywalker and Captain America: Brave New World? Pixie dusters, tell me more about all of it out there. Some will say it's superhero fatigue. Others will claim that the audience just changed consumer habits. But there's a far more obvious answer than the common person knows instantly. Marvel changed immediately after Endgame. They told you they were changing. They explained why they were changing. Funny names were given to the MCU to mock the direction Kevin Feige purposely took the franchise. MCU, anyone? But there's nothing funny about the change in market response to Marvel's deliberate alterations to its successful formula. Yet despite approximately 50% decline in attendance for most Marvel movies following those changes, there has yet been an official statement or mea culpa about something having gone wrong. In this case, hubris may just be what ends the Marvel theatrical legacy. And Pro's right. It's like we've talked about around here a million times. It's pride. It's ego. It's narcissism. They will never admit that getting in bed with the woke cult, getting possessed by the spirit of the age, and virtue signaling to every single one of their talking points was a bad idea. Because not only did you virtue signal, you put real money behind the spirit of the age. You spent billions of dollars turning Star Wars into a girl brand, turning Marvel into the MCU, turning Pixar into something more than was nothing more than trying to corrupt their children and being a mouthpiece for the spirit of the age. That's what's caused Fantastic Four to flop. I heard the movie wasn't woke. I didn't go see it. I went and saw Superman. Loved the hell out of it. Enjoyed it a lot. And guess what? It wasn't woke either. It's a brand new, fresh start for the DC. You know what Marvel doesn't have? A brand new, fresh start. They don't have anybody going out there admitting that maybe they were wrong, or maybe they needed to try something new, or maybe they needed to go in a different direction and reset absolutely everything. Allegedly, Avengers Secret Wars is supposed to do exactly that. But how are you even supposed to get to Avengers Secret Wars when you've got a couple more movies coming before that, and a bunch of other movies and television shows that are only going to continue to damage and devastate your brand even farther than it already is, if that's even possible at this point. I guess you could always hit Star Wars numbers, although you've already done that in the ratings and the television shows, and we don't exactly have a box office for Star Wars to compare it to yet. I can't wait for Mando and Grogu movie. But at the end of the day, they have done this to themselves. They, just like so many other people out there in entertainment and in institutions and politics, decided that it was a good idea to get in bed with the woke cult. They decided to dance with the devil because they had been lied to and believed that it was the new trendy thing. Or they were true believers right from the get-go. And they always wanted this, and this was always their intent. Much like what we saw happen to Marvel and DC Comics, much like what we've seen happen to a lot of our institutions over there, Marvel did the exact same thing. They decided to prioritize a political agenda over actually good storytelling, respecting their fans, and actually giving us characters that compare to the source material. Instead, they decided to spend billions of dollars chasing a modern audience that does not exist. And we have the numbers now to prove that modern audience does not and never did exist, and any kind of numbers to be financially viable. They have proven that with the billions of dollars that the entertainment industry has lost over the last few years chasing the woke. And then on top of that, if that wasn't bad enough, companies like Disney and Marvel and Star Wars decided to blame the fans. Commentators out there like Del Roca decided to instead insult the audience and call them stupid for not going to see Marvel's Fantastic Four movie. Yeah, that's a real bold strategy there, Cotton. I wonder how it's worked out for them. Well, I'll tell you exactly how it's worked out for them. It has cost them hundreds of billions of dollars. And now they've fired a bunch of the activists from a bunch of these different corporations. Skydance, Paramount, and Star Trek will no longer have DEI divisions anymore. And a lot of those jobs are being eliminated across the board. Because at the end of the day, despite all of the woke cult virtue signaling, the majority of these companies do not actually worship at your altar. They are not true believers. They are possessed by the spirit of the age. They are not possessed by the spirit of the age, unlike a lot of the activists that they hired and have now fired. But it doesn't matter because the damage is already done. And the majority of the fan base out there does not trust Disney Marvel anymore. That's why Fantastic Four, despite all of its rave reviews, has flopped at the box office. And ladies and gentlemen, it may very well end up being the incomplete and total end to what was once the predominant box office powerhouse in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It almost reminds you of something. It's almost like Disney did the exact same thing to Star Wars. After all, fans decide, and fans have decided that Marvel's dead, and it's Kevin Feige's fault. And you know what? You've gotten exactly what you deserve.